Welcome to another Breaking into Data session. I'm Aaron Filous, founder of Promotable, and with us tonight we have Lun Yu. So he's a principal data scientist at Rally Health. So really excited because I think it's an industry that's like super interesting from a data perspective. Of course, for folks who are trying to break in, lots of good experience and insights that we have coming up. And the last thing, of course, is Promotable. Who are we, and what do we do, and what is breaking into data? So of course, what we do here every single day is we help fill that data skills gap, help you flex that data muscle. And so it starts with our events community, breaking into data. And so who we are is essentially we're a community where accomplished data professionals, it could be data scientists, folks in analytics, across the board, but really just share knowledge and advice, insights to help inspire the next generation of data talent. So we do that, of course, through these events. And of course, for those who want to dive deeper, we have data courses, part-time data courses taught by practitioners for folks who want to, dive deeper. If you're in particular, if you're a non-technical, you might be in marketing or product, you want to make that transition, or you just want to add to your toolkit, check out promotable.io, and then or reach out to me after the event. I'm happy to chat more. But with that, let's dive into it. You want to just give us a quick intro on who you are, what you do, and then we'll dive into the conversation.
Great. Thanks, Aaron, for inviting me. I'm happy to share my story and answer any questions. So I'm Lun. I'm currently the principal data scientist at Rally Health. So Rally Health just recently fully merged into Optin. So a little introduction on Rally. For those who don't know what Rally is doing. So Rally Health is a digital health management company. It started in 2010 and was doing like gamification to encourage people to better manage their health conditions, to improve their health status. And in 2015, United Health invested in Rally Health and become the biggest client of Rally Health since then, and put like 5 million users sign up for Rally's service. And since then, Rally was managing the whole digital experience of United Health members. And in 2017, so the subsidiary of United Health, Optin. So Optin is a part of United Health and required Rally Health. So this year, I think the Rally no longer exists and fully become part of Optin Digital. This is what the Rally Health is doing. So I worked in personalization team, which is the core business of Rally, managing experience across different platforms and Optin product. So I think that this team, so Rally has been running for almost 10 years, and this team does not really exist before. And personalization, I think, just formed a little before I joined Rally in 2019. And at that time, they were thinking like they want to have more advanced analytics and methodology to help personalize users' digital experience on the health platforms. So since then, so they hired me to join the company and started this ML personalization team. And we were doing a lot of things to empower the ML capability on the digital health platform. So previously, I was working at Aetna, and Aetna was later acquired by CVS and become part of CVS company. So back in Aetna, I was working on behavior economics and machine learning. So it's basically, you can think of it as like marketing kind of work. I was trying to steer users from high cost providers to low cost providers, did a lot of analysis on, understanding users' behavior barriers, and use model to predict what they're going to do in the next few months or next year, and predict what kind of channels, content the user will be received, so we can change their behavior effectively. So that was my first job as data scientist in healthcare specifically. And before that, I was a PhD student at MIT, but I was studying nuclear science, mostly working on material science under nuclear environment. So I'm an experimentalist. I did experiments, so I have a lot of data to analyze. So I did a minor in statistics just to help me do my research. And I took a lot of statistics classes per requirements. And one of the favorite class I had is social networks. So it uses statistics and machine learning to analyze large graphs, large social graphs. So it was really interesting. So I decided to take a career in data science rather than nuclear materials. So yeah, that's basically my story.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting because, at least for me, I'm always fascinated by folks who spend, a long time diving into one particular area, and you're going for your PhD, and when you take all these skills and you go into something a little bit different. So I just see a question coming in. I know this person probably has to run to another appointment. So I'm going to get this question in a little bit, do things a little bit differently this time, and start answering questions early. But for someone who wants to land that first job in data science, or honestly just even in analytics, we'll say just entry-level data job. From your perspective, what are some of the most important skills that you have to pick up?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I've been interviewing people since my last job. Because when I joined Anna, it was a small team, and we grew very quickly. So did a lot of hirings, and I think in my evaluation on the candidates, what I look for is problem-solving skills. And I think that's the most important skill as a data scientist. It's easy to master those master programming, but it's hard to solve problems with math and programming. So in the data scientist work, your daily work, you will be presented a lot of vague business questions. Your business stakeholders, sometimes it's product people, sometimes it's marketing people, they will come to you and say, I want to improve the click-through rate of this product. How should I do it? And you need to go to your data and find answer for your product people. You need to first say, why do you need to solve this problem? Are we solving the right problems? Or what kind of tools we need to use? And what's the strategy of after building the model? I think sometimes people ignore how important it is. They are attracted to model building, and how fascinating those algorithms are, or some of the graphs you can show to people. But what actually matters to business is like how much value you can bring to me, you can bring to a business, and how do you demonstrate that value to business? I think that's the most important thing people need to know. Data scientists have to know how to bring value to business. And I think that's the problem-solving skills underneath it.
Yeah, and I'd love to dive deeper into understanding, what problem solving is. I'm just seeing some of these questions that come up. I think that for we have a lot of folks who join our events who are maybe really new to data. They're like, I think I want to do this. I want to, but maybe 2 to 3 years out, right? They're like, should I do a boot camp? Should I do a master's degree? I totally agree that the business question is, from most of these conversations, the higher level I go, that's like the skill that's missing. But what are like the base level like tools? Like, you need to have SQL? Is Python super necessary? Or some of these things that you have learn one of and then you pick the rest up as you work? Or what's your experience with that?
So that's kind of tricky to answer as actually, because if you're looking to become an engineer, more like let's say machine learning engineer, you need to follow the popular language the industry is using: Python, Scala, or JavaScript. Those are the popular languages people are using in the industry. So you will get advantage if you know those language pretty well. But if you're looking for the data scientists who are mostly working on the product, sometimes we call that product data scientist. Actually, I think that the language doesn't matter. You can pick whatever language they use. Most of them use SQL. You will see that if you go to interview, Facebook for data scientist role, the only thing you need to know is SQL. The language you need to know is SQL. Once you are familiar with one language, actually, I think it's easy to switch to other languages as well. I think currently those tools are pretty easy to use. I think 10 years ago, people couldn't believe how easy it is to train a model or write up some queries using the current tools. I think nowadays,
a robot.
yeah, or have a robot, playing AlphaGo. It's very easy now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's one actually really important point, I think, that we don't talk about enough, which is just how fast the industry has changed, even from 5 years ago or even 3 years ago, right? When LinkedIn said data scientist was the most the sexiest job of whatever it was, right, with 20th century. And even now, it's like now 3 years ago, it was only data scientists, but now there's like 4 different roles, because there should have been, right? At the end of the day, like they're making people who had, they said data scientists, but half the time it was you doing engineering work or like analyst work, right? Like, and I know I've asked this question quite a bit, but I think it kind of bears. It's always helpful for everyone to hear. Could you articulate the difference between someone who's a data scientist versus someone who is more of an analyst? The skill difference.
I think in a lot of roles, it's hard to distinguish those two as actually. I think recently people tend to define data scientists more as an analyst, like what Facebook did. To me, their data scientist is more like analyst. Their machine learning engineer is actually doing modeling work. Their research scientist is doing state of art research, like algorithm development. I think it varies in different companies. I think at Google, they define data scientists as, I think they just renamed their quantitative scientists as data scientists. And Amazon is another story as well. Data scientists mostly doing A/B testing. They have applied scientists, which is doing like modeling research kind of work. So different companies have different titles. I think when people are looking for a new job, they should look at behind that title what actually the job function is. At our company, data scientist is more like a research scientist. So we do a lot of research type of work. We have machine learning engineers specifically working on engineering stuff to productionize models. So in terms of like skills, you will be looking at, for example, some data scientists, they define as doing A/B testing, like designing experiments and getting some insights from your product and looking at what kind of new experiment we can launch. And there are some specifically like analyst type of work. You don't do experiments, you just retrospectively looking at your data and mining insights, generating business strategy, giving a proposal to your executives. And there are some machine learning engineers type of work, mostly working on infrastructure, working on productionizing models. So you should be familiar with some popular frameworks like TensorFlow, PyTorch, and Scala frameworks like distributed training, and how to allocate resources across GPUs, etc.
Yeah. So I think that the message, if I can summarize it, is definitely go beyond the title. And I've had very similar experience when speaking of different companies. Last week we had someone from LinkedIn, and it said, her title was data scientist, but a lot of what she did was what I would say is more analyst work in terms of like looking at data, generating insights, saying, here's, based on this information, here's what we think. But then some companies, it's to your point, you're doing a lot of modeling, you're doing, ML stuff. So definitely kind of go beyond that. But I still think it's good to talk about that distinction, because I think a lot of times we throw it out there, and I think sometimes companies do a bad job of actually like explaining, hey, like at our company this is what this means. At other companies it might be something different.
Sometimes company probably doesn't know. Sometimes it just doesn't know what they're looking for. Like when I joined Rally, they don't actually know. They didn't actually know what kind of things, what kind of skills or work the data scientists have to do. Basically, when I came here, I defined that.
Which is important. That's how you know you're at a good team, once you've like defined, like, because I think the thing we want to talk about as well is like you're on a data team, right? So you have like your analysts, you have your modeling people, you have your data viz people, you have your ML people. And so it's like all over the board. But here's a question, since I know, going through recruiting and hiring, it's a lot of work, and if you're not used to it, it's definitely tiring. I know going through 5 to 6 interviews a day, after a while you're like, it all looks the same. One thing I think there is, in terms of folks who are trying to figure out what they should be learning now, what's like the baseline? So we talked about SQL a little bit. Is there like, I don't know if you can give an example of like stuff that like is super important, like joins or that kind of thing, versus something that might be less important? Or like, what kinds of things should you be able to do at base level at most companies?
For SQLs? Yeah. So SQLs mostly get very familiar with different joins, and in what situations you should use which joins. A very frequent questions will be the difference, having and where, in which situation you should use having, in which situation you should use where. Grouping, another one that's frequently asked in the interview. And usually pay attention to, duplicates when you do joins, and how to deduplicate the data. And I think usually those SQL questions are not very difficult. They're very straightforward. They're just testing your whether you can understand the questions. Like usually they will say, for example, give you four tables, you figure out what's the monthly revenue of something or monthly transactions of something. And how to join different tables together to get the answer, and pay attention to things like how to deduplicate the data, where when you should use where clause and when you should use group, things like that.
That's really cool. I mean, I think a lot of times these are like like if you're going to be in analytics, you need to know SQL. If you want to go further up the value chain, you probably need to know either Python or R, generally speaking. But I think to your point, I think some of it is just like they're not the hardest questions in the world. They just want to make sure that you can do it, right? And they're weeding out people who really are inexperienced. But transitioning a little bit, we've got a question about domain knowledge. And so I love your thoughts of kind of transitioning jobs and how valuable was for example, having worked in the healthcare space at CVS, now in building your team at Rally, or just even going through the interview process.
I was a little lucky. So I graduated in spring. So back in that time, there were not many company hiring during spring season. So just a few company hiring, and Anna was one of them. And I look at those companies, I think Anna was the most interesting one because healthcare, it has a lot of new problems to me. I think back in then, it was completely new, the problem they're solving. And I think for fresh grads, the bar back then was not very high. They were just like asking like very fundamental things, like what is PCA, when you should use PCA, why do you use PCA, explaining some algorithm like that.
For the benefit of the audience, what is PCA?
A principal component analysis. Things like that. They will ask some of the very basic things, just from the textbook. And I think that the hardest thing I had is the transition, like from Anna to a tech company. When I interviewed tech company, I was getting totally different questions. So when I changed the job, right? So I interviewed at Lyft. I think that was the hardest interview I ever got. I saw someone ask like domain knowledge. I think back then, since I was interviewing for a senior role, they will expect me to have domain knowledge about their ride sharing business. And I totally failed at that question because I knew nothing back then. I think some companies, they do look for domain knowledge. If you don't have domain knowledge, some company they will ask you, especially for senior roles. Even right now, when we're hiring for people where there's some very specific role we're hiring, like we're doing search engine, so we're hiring people who know specifically search engines. So when you get to the senior roles, domain knowledge is, you can't avoid it. You have to have some domain knowledge in order to be hired at the senior role.
It's like can't avoid it, and would even be advantageous, right? To be able to speak on to understand the business problems that those companies are solving. If you're going in for Lyft, you should have you should understand how ride hailing works. You should understand how the marketplace works. If you're doing another kind, or even like optimization, right? You should, there's a lot of companies that that do that kind of work, but
especially some tricky questions they will ask you regarding their business. I remember like Lyft, they asked things like, in this area, so you have cars go in and out, and how do you define demand? How do you define demand or supply? It's kind of like tricky questions they will ask you. And you should really know some of the insider information to answer it pretty well. And I think if I can do it again, I'll probably read a lot more about their business or some things related to that. I think currently people lots of people are publishing, writing blogs about some specific domain, specific industry, analytics related to that. And I think if I can do that again, read more about those and feel myself more with that domain knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. Because we had someone last week. She's a data analyst at Spotify, and she mentioned that one of the things that she did, she read the annual report or skimmed it anyway, to like understand the like the basic problems and what was how they made their money and what they cared about, and just like, understand like throwing those buzzwords into her as part of her as part of her interview process helped her a lot. I think. And helped her, but also at the end of the day, especially if you're an analyst where your job is to show insights from the business, you gotta understand that kind of stuff. I mean, I think in general, and this is just maybe my opinion, but one of the bigger pain points that I think you probably share this opinion of, I think a lot of whether it's in data science or analytics or however you want to define it, right? We get so caught up in the fancy stuff, the machine learning, the TensorFlow, we forget about like why we're doing it, right? What the we get paid by the business, right? It's like we get paid to deliver those kinds of results. But talking a little bit more about kind of what that transition was like for you going from nuclear physics, right? PhD or materials, sorry.
Materials, yeah. Materials.
But going from that to industry, like were there things like, that your first like 2 months at night, you were like, oh man, I have to learn all these other new things, or like what was that transition like?
I think the most difficult thing is healthcare. Is the industry I'm getting into, because it was like completely new industry to me. So it took a while for me to accumulate enough healthcare knowledge, and I think Anna was great in providing employees training courses. They even hired people to teach us behavior economics, teach us healthcare industry kind of things, and I think that was great. Technical wise, I think writing production level code is another challenge, because back in school when we did research, never think about this is gonna go production. You're gonna scale it up, so or you need to pay attention to best practice of software engineering, and that was difficult to change the mindset. People did PR review, criticize you, and you need to take it, not feel offended, things like that.
It's always a challenge, right? It's always hard, right? When someone complains or tells you you're not doing it right. I mean, sometimes it's just we all have bosses that are kind of assholes, but sometimes it's like you can be nice and still deliver that news, and even if they're nice, it still hurts a little bit.
Yeah, sometimes you get comments like, the naming convention is not correct. This is not our standard practice. Things like that. You will get some of those comments, and you don't understand. Like I don't understand. I didn't understand back then. Why doesn't matter? I just name it A. I just name this variable A, and people are like, you can't name it as A. You need to give a meaningful name, so people can read your code. Can understand it. Yeah, so that was kind of like a mindset change, and I had a great time transitioning to more like a business mindset, because I did my intern at Accenture. I was a management consultant intern at Accenture in their financial services group. So I was trained as a consultant back then. So I had a great time transitioning, but I did know sometimes people have difficulty transitioning to a business mindset, like how to talk to business people, how to communicating technical details to business people.
Yeah.
You cannot just tell business people my AUC is 0.9 or 0.8. They can't understand what that means. And sometimes it's really hard to explain what AUC is, especially the implication of your AUC number to business. So you have to transform it into the language saying, using my model, how much percentage of user you can target with how much accuracy you can capture, how much value you will get based on this model. And that kind of language, like storytelling skills, a lot of people might find difficult transitioning to that. But I was lucky because I was trained as a consultant before, so I know how to do it. And I was lucky as well to work with a bunch of McKinsey consultants in my previous company. So they really appreciated that storytelling skills. But sometimes some people, like very technical people, may find it really difficult working with business people, like understanding what they are looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, especially when you're working with like product managers who, they might know a few buzzwords, but they're not going to have any idea what you mean, even if you tell them your model targets 1%. Well, if the thing you're looking for is less than 1%, they're not going to get the difference. But going back to kind of like now you're building a team, right? Oh, I guess you built 2 teams now, but the veteran team and now the rally team. What kinds of, aside from work experience, obviously folks tend to have some sort of project work. What stuff do you look for? What kind of stands out when you're looking through projects?
Projects, when I look at people's project experience, the one thing that may piss me off is those very popular projects you may find on Kaggle or some of your boot camp things like that. You see those very common projects pop up, and that really pissed me off because I want to see your passion in the project, like the problem you really care about. You're solving a problem you really care about, then other people are rarely solving it. That's something that might impress me, and I want to see how you are tackling that problem instead of just throwing your work on that problem. I want to see some outcome, some innovative, creative things you have done for that project. If it's work experience, I would probably look for like what kind of model you are using, how much value you bring. You want to evaluate that project. Or if that's your side projects, I want to know what's your motivation behind that. What drives you to work on that project? If you can justify that, I think that would be really great projects to impress people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, someone said Boston housing data set. Yeah, there are a couple of very popular data sets or problems people are have been working on. So it's very easy, for people just to copy code from other people and just say I did this. It will not impress your interviewers.
Yeah, no, not at all. I think some people are so focused on doing something that feels complicated that they end up doing exactly what you said, right? I remember I had someone who told me the worst thing was like their boss had told them that they should do a Titanic data set. And I was like, of all things, like everyone does it, practice on it, right? But don't put that on your resume. That's like the worst thing you could possibly do. The Boston housing data set's another one. The New York real estate one, same thing. One, I mean, to your point, like one of the ones I always talk about for me was always like an interesting project. It wasn't like particularly fancy, but we had someone who he's at this point, I forget where he works now, but he was an analyst at the time at Spark Foundry or something. But I was asking him, like, how did you land that job? And what things were valuable? And he was like, honestly, I did this project, and so he's a sports junkie. I think it was baseball. And he went and created a new statistic, created a model around it, and predicted wins or something like that, based on this thing that he made. And I'm like, oh, well, that's actually really cool. And it shows like you care about something, right? You went about, you found a business question, you created the sub questions, and you tried to solve for it. At least you can show that process. Everything else you can learn.
Yeah. A lot of things like so sometimes people are looking for creativity in this data scientist role, because a lot of work does require creativity, and sometimes you're presented by a very vague questions, and you need to generate some creative ideas to solve that problem. I think if your side projects can demonstrate some of that, you're discovering something new, you're discovering or you're creating some novel metrics or novel analysis method to even to tackle some of the like old problem. I think that was still good. That would be still good. But if it's a new problem you're discovering, then that's even better.
Well, especially if you're new to the industry and you have training, but maybe you don't have, think about kind of like where, imagine if, you were trying to go from PhD to, and now you didn't have like the consulting background, right? You didn't have like other stuff. And it's like, well, how else can I show that I know this? And at least, I think most people get so caught up in making sure they know enough SQL or Python that like, they forget about kind of the why and like what the most important thing, to your point, right, is understanding how to solve the problem. And I think that starts with understanding what the problem is. How often is that actually kind of diving into it, working with stakeholders and such? How often do you get like the really vague problems, and like, is there a lot of education that you have to do with your stakeholders? Say, oh, well, if you want to answer, is this the right question, or maybe is there a different question? Like, how do you how does that happen?
So in rally, that happens a lot. That happens a lot. People, there are two kinds of people, right? There's one that is people have heard of machine learning and they feel very excited about that, but they don't actually know what machine learning can do. There are probably some imagination in their mind, and they have some crazy ideas that's not even feasible. The other kind of people, they're very skeptical, and they're really reluctant to switch from the traditional way of doing their work and giving it to machine learning, giving it to models. I think most of the time we're doing this kind of to stakeholders. I think different strategies to dealing with those stakeholders for people who are really excited about them. I think managing their expectations is very important. Otherwise, you're putting yourself into a fire.
Once you tell them you can do something and then it turns out you can't, that is hard to come back from. But stepping back a little bit and going back to a question here from someone who is asking, how do you show your coding skills, right? Is it do you do GitHub stuff? Is there a different thing you should be working on, in particular for people who are looking for their first job, likely, or I don't know, like what do you do?
If the coding is very important, like for machine learning engineer role, you will get tons of coding throughout your interviews. You'll probably have 3 rounds of coding interviews, mostly like LeetCode-like interviews. So for those interviews, I think the most important thing is to practice on LeetCode questions, get very familiar with the easy level, and have confidence solving medium level questions. In terms of GitHub, I think I don't think a lot of interviewers will check your GitHub unless you got lots of stars on your GitHub. You are very popular leaders in that community. That may give you a shortcut to some positions. But for people who are just ordinary people like me, practicing on legal is the key to get a position that has very emphasis on the coding.
Yeah, I know exactly. Yeah, I mean, look, we're not saying don't do GitHub. Put some stuff on there for sure. But I think the more important thing is being able to actually solve the problems and being comfortable. And especially I see your comment about getting nervous. It happens to all of us. We all get nervous. Honestly, the best way to handle that is just do it over and over and over again. Have someone watch you, and make friends. Ask them to do the same thing. It's just it's always hard when someone's watching you, but that's the it's always sometimes you just have to do stuff, and then do it again. You're gonna mess it up, and it's okay if you mess it up, right? That's how you learn.
Yeah, actually, I think one candidate impressed me by doing one thing. She didn't have a programming background, but I think she learned the programming on her own. So she contacted me on LinkedIn, and I said, I have concern about your programming skills because this is the engineer title, engineer position. So she basically did legal questions on her own computer. She recorded that session and sent that to me to prove that she can code very well.
That's innovative. I mean, I think she went around. I'm actually I'd be impressed too.
Yeah. So if you have concern, let's say you do not have engineering background or do not have programming background, you want to impress people. I think that's probably one way of doing it.
Yeah. What other communities would you recommend for folks who are trying to either understand what kinds of coding problems to work on, or how to understand if their level is kind of the right fit? I mean, I think the first thing is exactly what that lady did, right? She reached out to you and was like, do I have the right fit? I mean, if you're not reaching out to people on LinkedIn, reach out, ask questions, don't ask for a referral or a job. You're not going to get it. They don't know you, they're not going to do the work for you. But in terms of communities, Stack Overflow is one that I always recommend. But where other places you recommend either working on coding challenges or that sort of thing, or just data science communities in general? I don't know where you direct people.
Programming, definitely code. They have a nice community. People discuss the different ways of solving the problems. That's pretty nice. If you want to know more about a company, Blind is probably a good place to start with. People gossip a lot about their companies on the platform. You can even pick into how much people earn for different levels. That's very useful when you're negotiating your salary. So yeah. Data science, I don't actually I'm not involved in any conversational communities, but I use Medium blog to keep track of what's new in the industry. I think they have good recommender systems.
Yeah, they do. Well, there's always sports data science, right?
Yeah, there are lots of data science thing, and I think a couple of top companies, they also publish their blogs on Medium. I remember Airbnb, Uber, right? They all, Pinterest, they all published on Medium, and sometimes maybe you can reply to their blog, asking questions. That can be a starting point of having conversation with the engineers in the company you are interested in. And if you ask smart questions, you may be offered a chance to interview with them.
Well, I think that's like the business model of places like Kaggle, right? At the end of the day, it's like you do a challenge, and all they're looking for is people who do things that are interesting, or they're just incredibly smart for some other reason. But that's like one of the channels. And I mean, honestly, like that's a great idea. Like reach out to people who are publishing blogs. Like I think the outreach is something that people don't do enough, or when they do it, they reach out and just ask for a referral, and that's like not always the best approach.
And Kaggle, and I think when I was in school, I really liked Kaggle, but I think Kaggle, you have to pay attention. Don't get too obsessed with those minimizing the loss or for 0.001 point. That's ridiculous. But I think some of the good solutions, mostly you can see some patterns in those good solutions. They are really creative in feature engineering. That can teach you a lot, in terms of understanding data, how to basically generate insights from data.
How to approach all of those things. Here's a kind of, we've got time for a couple more questions, and I'll take the first one. So obviously we talked a little bit about how the industry has changed a lot, even in 10 years, right, in 5 years. I know obviously there's what was important for you when you were first interviewing, but now, for someone, for like a junior data scientist, what are the things that are like the most important things that they should be learning or preparing for?
So I think previously the data science questions or interviews were pretty easy, right? They're based on some foundations, some fundamental knowledge. But I think right now it becomes more and more important how much you know about using data to solve problems. And at least from my experience, that's more and more important because there are more and more programs, data science programs, data science degrees you can get from school, and there are more and more people in this field. Asking those standard questions no longer help distinguish talents. Unfortunately, right? Unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. When thinking of those kinds of things, how much weight do you put on whether it's like a coding bootcamp certificate or like the Google Analytics certificate? Like, what do you think of things like that? Are they good? Are they like, show some sort of base level skill, but if you have that and then you can problem solve, or what are your thoughts?
I personally place no importance on those certificates. Because it's so easy to get those certificates. You will probably see a lot of people doing, Coursera certificates, Google certificates. It's not a high bar, so it's not gonna help distinguish yourself from others. If you don't have background, maybe that can show that you have at least basic knowledge of it, but it's not gonna help you ace the interview or impress the interviewers. The certificate itself will not.
It may help establish some basic level knowledge, right? You may even get an interview, but from there you have to show all the other things. I think I want to leave folks with kind of going back to your question about understanding, problem solving that's kind of one of the most important things. How can people either practice or learn how to do that within the data science space? Is there like a book someone could read or some other kind of way of like learning that mindset?
There's a book called Data Science in Business. The author is called Foster Provost.
Got it. I think Raymond just threw it in there for us. So let's just.
Yeah, that's it. And this is in general talking about data science for business. And if you're interested in A/B experiments, there's another book called Trustworthy Online Control Experiments. I find that book really good. I think that's by Ron Kohavi. Trustworthy, trustworthy online experiments. I think that the authors are a bunch of tech executives. They retired PM. I think they wrote that book. That's really good for A/B testing. And there's another one for analytics. It's called Lean Analytics.
Oh yeah, that one I think there's a lot of people have read that one, but it's still one to add to the collection. Lean Analytics. I love how there's so many lean things. Lean Analytics, the Lean Startup, the Lean Product Playbook. Anyway, so that's all we've got in terms of time. We've kept you for a full hour, but lots of really good questions. Really happy everyone was really engaged today. So obviously, if there's any more questions, catch us at the next one. Definitely, thanks. Obviously, thanks for coming. Give us a like on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me if anyone's interested. Happy to continue chatting. With that, I hope to see you guys next time. But thanks everyone for coming.